The difference between $10,000 and $20,000 is math. The difference between $90,000 and $100,000, that's identity. Because once you cross that line, you stop thinking like someone who earns money and you start thinking like someone who owns it. And that changes everything. Why $100,000 changes everything? Introduction. You ever log into your bank account and just kind of or stare at the number? Not because it's impressive, not because it's terrifying, just because it's there. Maybe it's $3,842.17. Maybe it's $27,503. Maybe it's $812. And you do that little mental math thing in your head. Rent is due in 12 days, credit card bill in 6, car insurance next month. And you sort of breathe in, hold it, and think, am I okay? Or am I one bad week away from chaos? Most people live in that space. Not broke, but not safe either. You make decent money. You're responsible. You're trying. You're investing a little, saving a little, paying things down. And yet, there's this invisible ceiling. This feeling that no matter how hard you push, you're still operating on a tightrope. And somewhere in the back of your mind, there's this number, $100,000. It feels big, huge even, kind of abstract. Like something that belongs to real investors or business owners or people in finance magazines. I'm Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about money. Not just the spreadsheets and the math, but the psychology of it. Why some numbers feel life-changing and others barely move the needle. Why crossing certain thresholds shifts your behavior in ways that have nothing to do with the actual dollars. And honestly, why $100,000 isn't just a number. It's a psychological border. Because here's the thing no one really explains. The difference between $10,000 and $20,000 is math. The difference between $90,000 and $100,000, that's identity. And if you understand what actually changes at $100,000 and why, you'll stop obsessing over small wins and start building towards something that fundamentally alters how you think about money, risk, freedom, and your own future. So let's talk about it, not in a flashy, you'll be rich overnight kind of way, but in a grounded, real life, this is how your brain and behavior shift kind of way. Because honestly, $100,000 changes everything. $100,000 is the first time money starts working louder than you do. Let's start with something simple. If you have $1,000 invested and it grows 8% in a year, you made $80. Cool, that's dinner. If you have $10,000 invested and it grows 8%, you made $800. Nice, that's a weekend trip. But at $100,000, that same 8% is $8,000 without you doing anything. No extra shifts, no side hustle, no grind season, just time and capital. And that's when something clicks. Up until that point, progress feels painfully manual. You save, you sacrifice, you automate transfers, you resist impulse buys, you track expenses. It's all very effort-based. You're pushing a boulder uphill. But around $100,000, you start noticing something weird. The boulder starts rolling back on its own. I remember the first time I saw a 5-figure gain in a year. I didn't feel rich, I didn't quit my job, but I did feel something shift internally. For the first time, I realized, oh, this isn't just about what I earn anymore. This is about what I own. And that's a different game. Why it matters, because your relationship with work changes, subtly at first. You're less desperate for every raise, less reactive to every expense. You start thinking in terms of asset growth, not just income growth. Actionable takeaway, if you're below $100,000, your primary focus should be accumulation rate, increase savings percentage, increase income, automate investing, because once you cross a threshold, your compound growth starts to feel tangible. And that psychological reinforcement makes it easier to stay consistent. 2, $100,000 reduces fear, even if you don't touch it. Let's be honest, most financial stress isn't about math, it's about uncertainty. What if I lose my job? What if the car breaks? What if something goes wrong? When you have $3,000 saved, those questions feel sharp, urgent, heavy. At $20,000, you feel better, but still cautious. At $100,000, you breathe differently, even if that money is invested, even if you don't plan to touch it. Just knowing it exists changes your posture. It's like walking a tightrope with a safety net underneath. You still try not to fall, but you're not paralyzed. I once had a friend who hit $100,000 in investments right before his company went through layoffs. And instead of panic, he felt calm, not happy about it, not reckless, just steady, because he knew I can survive this. That's powerful. Why it matters. Confidence isn't just emotional, it's financial. And confidence changes decisions. You negotiate harder. You explore better opportunities. You take calculated risks, actionable advice. Don't treat $100,000 as a spending goal. Treat it as a stability goal. Build it not to consume, but to reduce fear. Because reduced fear leads to better choices. 3. You stop obsessing over small expenses. You know that phase where you're optimizing everything? Switching phone plans to save $12. Driving across town for cheaper gas. Stress calculating whether eating out ruins your budget. That phase is necessary when you're starting. But around $100,000, your brain shifts from micro optimization to macro leverage. Because you realize something uncomfortable, saving $15 a month matters way less than increasing your income by $5,000 a year. And increasing your investment contributions by $500 a month matters more than clipping coupons. When you have momentum, you focus on force multipliers. I'm not saying you become reckless. You still care. But you stop treating every tiny purchase like a moral failure. And honestly, that's freeing. Why it matters. Scarcity thinking shrinks your world. Abundance thinking, grounded abundance, not delusion, expands it. Actionable takeaway. In the early phase, cut expenses aggressively. In the later phase, shift your mental energy toward growth strategies, promotions, skill stacking, business ideas, investment optimization. Different stages require different focus. 4. Your identity changes. Quietly. This one's subtle. You don't wake up at $100,000 and think, I'm wealthy now. But you do stop thinking of yourself as bad with money or just getting by. You start thinking, I'm someone who builds. And identity is everything. If you see yourself as someone who always struggles financially, you'll subconsciously make decisions that reinforce that story. But once you've built $100,000, slowly, patiently, you have evidence, real proof. You can't lie to yourself anymore. You're disciplined, you're consistent, you're capable. That internal narrative shift is massive. It affects how you plan your future, whether you consider entrepreneurship, whether you aim for early retirement, whether you believe $1 million is realistic. Because now you've done something hard, and hard things build confidence. Actionable advice. Track milestones, celebrate them, even if no one else cares. Because every checkpoint reinforces your new identity, and identity compounds just like money. 5. Opportunity becomes accessible. This is practical. With $100,000, options open. You can invest in a rental property, start a business without debt, take a career break, relocate, invest more aggressively during downturns. You're no longer stuck reacting, you can act. And acting, place verb proactively, is how wealth accelerates. During market crashes, people with no liquidity panic. People with capital deploy. I remember 2020, the fear, the headlines, the uncertainty. And yet, for people who had reserves, it was an opportunity window. Money creates optionality, and optionality is power. Actionable takeaway. Once you approach $100,000, start thinking about strategic allocation. Not just where do I park this, but what flexibility does this give me? Money isn't just numbers, it's choices. 6. Your time horizon expands before $100,000. You think in months. After $100,000, you think in decades, because now the math of compounding feels real. At 8% annually, $100,000 becomes approximately $466,000 in 20 years. No extra contributions. That's not fantasy. That's math. And when you internalize that, patience becomes easier. You stop chasing hype. You stop panic selling. You stop trying to double money overnight because you realize time is the multiplier. Why it matters. Long-term thinking reduces emotional volatility, and emotional stability improves returns. Actionable advice. Once you cross $100,000, build a 10 to 20-year projection. See the compounding visually. It will anchor your behavior. 7. You realize $100,000 isn't enough, and that's healthy. Here's the twist. When you finally hit $100,000, it doesn't feel like you thought it would. You're proud, yes, But you also realize, oh, I'm not done. It's not financial freedom. It's not retirement. It's not generational wealth. It's a foundation. And that realization is humbling, but motivating. Because the hardest part wasn't the amount, it was building the system. And once the system exists, scaling becomes easier. Going from $0 to $100,000 is harder than $100,000 to $200,000 because discipline is now automatic. Investing is habitual. Saving is identity based. Actionable takeaway. Don't treat $100,000 as the finish line. Treat it as proof of concept. You built the machine. Now let it run. Conclusion. So why does $100,000 change everything? Not because it makes you rich, not because you suddenly live differently, but because it changes how you see risk, time, opportunity, and yourself. It's the first time money feels like an ally instead of a stressor. The first time compounding feels tangible. The first time you realize, I can actually do this. And maybe you're at $2,000 right now. Maybe $18,000. Maybe $73,000. Wherever you are, the principles are the same. Focus on accumulation. Build systems, increase income. Automate investing. Think long term. Because the real transformation isn't the number in the account. It's the mindset shift that happens on the way there. And once that shift happens, you stop surviving. So maybe $100,000 doesn't make you rich. Maybe it doesn't buy you freedom overnight. But it does something far more important. It changes how you see money. It changes how you see risk. And eventually, it changes how you see yourself. And once that happens, you don't go back to surviving. You start building.